The misinformation, in a way, is the biggest hurdle. Even though we have public health agencies in Britain who are actively pushing vaping for smokers, more people believe that vaping is as dangerous or more dangerous than smoking than it did 10 years ago.
Well, welcome. My name's Mark Littlewood. I'm the Director General here at the Institute of Economic Affairs. And this is one in a series of year in review, looking back at 2022 as it draws to a close. I'm going to be joined by IEA experts to give their specialist take on how the year has gone for them. And in this instalment, I'm talking to my good friend and Head of Lifestyle Economics, Christopher Snowdon. Chris, great to have you with me. 2022 now. Your lifestyle economics, what we mean by that are kind of controversial products or services that are usually heavily regulated, heavily taxed, perhaps both, sugary or unhealthy foods, tobacco products, alcohol, gambling, that kind of stuff. And you are usually a pretty downbeat kind of person that everything is getting much, much worse. Has everything got much, much worse in 2022 in your field?
Hasn't really changed, to be quite honest with you. It's been a year of prevarication. So there are two or three white papers that we're waiting for, or two actually. There's one on tobacco, which has been in the pipeline for a good 18 months to 2 years. And there's one on gambling, which has been lingering around for roughly the same amount of time. On top of that, we've got the so-called anti-obesity stuff that Boris Johnson got underway back in around June 2020, after he had his brush with death and blamed this on supermarket promotions, apparently. So that became part of the health and care bill. But then when Liz Truss came in, actually Boris Johnson had already postponed some of this stuff because it was seen to be basically part of the anti-growth coalition. It was going to be bad for the economy. So the advertising ban was pushed back to 2024, and the ban on bog-offs and volume price discounts was pushed back to 2023. Liz Truss then tried to push all of it back, essentially, but I think failed. But I believe the only thing that's actually come in, apart from mandatory calorie counts on menus, is the ban on putting so-called junk food at the end of aisles in supermarkets. So very little has actually happened, but we are expecting probably a splurge of it next year.
Okay, so more kicked into the short grass than kicked into the long grass. Yeah. Okay, well, let's break these down one by one. The delightfully named bog-off, buy one, get one free deals. That's been delayed until October 2023. I can't get my head around this. I don't understand what would be the difference between, I don't know, buy one bottle of wine and get one free, or just having a larger bottle of wine,
or having half price wine.
Or having half price wine. Yes. Yeah. How on earth? I can't even. I mean, it seems to me crazy to try and do this anyway, because there are just pricing mechanisms around it. Should we even be worried about it? Rather than, as you say, rather than buy one, get one free, just cut the price by 50%.
Yeah, that's the obvious get around on this, and that's what they'll do. And it's very difficult to see how the government would respond to that, because the government's not going to literally set prices. So, yeah.
Well, I mean,
not at this stage anyway. You did see that because the Scottish government brought in effectively a bog-off ban on booze a few years ago. It had absolutely no effect on consumption or alcohol problems or anything like that. It just meant that some shops would discount their wine. I suppose the good thing about volume price discounts from the retailer's point of view is it does help them shift a lot of stock.
Right.
So if something's going out of date, for example, or if there just happens to be something on promotion, they want to get out of the door so they can get more stuff in on the pallets, then yeah, I guess a kind of 3 for 2 deal is better from their point of view than a half price deal or a third off deal or something like that, because people might end up buying more of it. Of course, that's the one thing the public health.
But why not just put things in bigger containers?
Well, yeah, effectively. I mean, I'm trying to find some justification for it, really. But yeah, it's very difficult to see how it would make much difference in practice. But it is an interference in the, there is a reason retailers are doing this, and it's not to make us all fat. They do genuinely want to get stuff out there. The manufacturers do want to promote their products. I'm one for it when I go shopping. Don't know about you. If I see something on promotion, because I'm not particularly brand loyal, I will pick that up.
And what sort of products do these apply to? Is it alcohol?
It could be any kind of thing. Well, it's what they call junk food. It's not alcohol, actually. No, right. Alcohol has got a carve out for all this stuff, funny enough, because it's all meant to be about childhood obesity.
Right.
And so that one of the unintended consequences of the ban on positioning so-called junk food at the end of aisle is there's loads of vodka there now, because it's not covered, or e-cigarettes even, as well as kind of toilet.
But no Cocoa Pops.
No Cocoa Pops, no crisps or anything like that. So it's so-called junk junk food, which is what they call high in fat, sugar, or salt, covers a huge range of food, far wider than.
So again, let me try and get my head around this. So this has now come in, has it?
The end of aisle thing.
So the rule here is that the assumption is that things at the front or the end of the aisle are somehow draws one's eye towards them, whereas being sort of right in the middle of the aisle, you walk past it.
They are well known for being promotional
premium,
slots,
right? And what can you not now put at the end of an aisle, and you need now to put in the middle of an aisle?
Cheese,
bacon,
crisps, chocolates, any kind of confectionery, anything. Really,
this is based around what, calories?
It is actually, partly on calories, partly on the sugar content, fat content, and salt content. So it's a huge range of foods, which is why, realistically, supermarkets aren't going to start putting cucumbers there.
Right.
They already promote the fruit and veg very well by having it at the front of the shop. There isn't that much you can put there, which is why it ends up being whiskey,
right.
and toilet roll.
Are you allowed to just leave it empty? Just have like slightly longer aisles where the last. I mean, what is the end of aisle? Is it the last foot, 2 foot?
No, it's a bit that's pointing away from the rest of the aisle.
Got it. Okay, right. You could just leave that empty then, I guess.
You could, but it is a genuinely quite useful promotional spot. It's the kind of thing that when people are waiting with their trolleys to check out their looker behind you, and sometimes you might find, shoelaces. I could do with some shoelaces.
Right. Yeah. So Jacob Rees-Mogg spoke to us at our think tent. This was back when he was business secretary in the short-lived Liz Truss administration. We did an in conversation with Jacob Rees-Mogg, then the business secretary, at our think tent at the Tory conference. And he actually sort of suggested that we should have some civil disobedience here, that individuals should pick up the chocolate oranges and move them to the right next to the till. But that hasn't led to this being completely abandoned. In fact, it has now come in. Right?
It's come in, and apparently the supermarket is actually quite happy about this. And when there was talk
does it just apply to supermarkets, or does it apply to?
Yeah, it's only supermarkets.
So if you're a small shop,
it was originally going to apply to small shops, and then people point out the obvious problem with this. So small businesses have got to come.
What is the obvious problem with
this? Well, if you've got a small shop, everything's like
right,
it's either near the entrance or near the checkout, or it's at the end of the aisle. So it doesn't really work. But apparently supermarkets are fairly happy with this because they like you getting lost. It's the reason that the eggs are always the hardest thing to find in the supermarket is that everybody needs eggs. And so they wander around looking for the
Like
an
eggs. Easter egg hunt, you've got to actually walk past everything else.
Exactly.
Yep.
And they want you to get lost. And now people are getting lost because the chocolate or whatever is not obvious, where you find it. And things are essentially on one long sin aisle. And people go looking for some chocolate buttons, and they also find some peanuts there as well, and some
peanuts aren't bad for you, are they?
Salty, very salty.
Oh, okay, right, okay. All right. So as we know at the moment, this is just going to be delayed till next year. But do you think it will be throttled and killed? Is it just been delayed because of kind of political and government turmoil? Oftentimes, when things are delayed politically, it's potentially the sign of a death knell. Or are you expecting this to kick in? I mean, I think the buy one get one free deals going to be banned from October 2023, and advertising bans for products high in salt, fat, and sugar delayed to January 2024. But is there any optimism to cling on to that delay that is going to get kicked further and further into the grass?
I wouldn't put money on it, but I think it's fairly easy to believe that it might get eventually forgotten about. I mean, it would have to. I don't know if it actually has to be taken out of the legislation, where you can literally say, well, we're going to do this in 100 years. I'm not sure. I think you keep pushing it back. And there is a good argument for it. I mean, obviously, we at the IEA have been making the argument for it. But Boris Johnson essentially made the argument himself when he pushed it back. Because he said, well, the advertising ban is not appropriate to do that now because the economy is not doing very well. So the implication very clearly is this is not a good thing for the economy. And the bog-off price, volume price discount thing was seen as being inappropriate at a time of cost of living problems. And there's always cost of living problems, at least for some people in society. So I think it's quite hard to then come back and say, well, now we're confident the economy is doing so well. We can hamper it somewhat with advertising restrictions. And everyone's now so wealthy that they won't mind paying a bit more for the hot cross buns.
So it might be kicked again, you suspect or hope?
Well, I hope so, but I mean, who knows?
Now, the Scottish government, is this the cutting edge of paternalism in the United Kingdom, Scotland? They've had a government consultation on restricting alcohol advertising and promotion. What would those restrictions
Banning
be?
it completely. Really.
Banning it, not really restricting it, prohibiting it.
Very, very heavily restricting it by banning everything. I mean, yeah, pretty much.
But hang on, what if you've got a TV set in Scotland?
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? They haven't got the authority.
You can still see a Carlsberg advert or something.
Immediately you've spotted one of the flaws in this proposal, which is the Scottish government is limited in what it actually can ban.
I mean, they could ban poster sites.
They could ban bus shelters and billboards and things like that. They can't ban TV. They can't ban radio. I don't think they can ban digital. Certainly not very easy. So, and yet they put it in the consultation anyway, which is interesting.
Right.
And I think the message they're trying to send out is, well, we would like to ban all this advertising, but of course we can't. However, if you do, go for Scottish independence.
This is their call for independence. Please go independent. So,
so we can
free
ban,
yourself. So
we can ban Guinness adverts on TV. Yeah.
Now, tell me a bit about the Scottish case, because they've had minimum pricing of alcohol. You can't sell alcohol units below
50p a unit. Yeah.
50p a unit, and a unit is what, half a pint?
Half a pint, basically. Yeah.
And has that been sort of de minimis that actually all units of alcohol were 50p or more anyway, or 48p or more anyway, or did that really dial up?
Big impact. Big impact. There was, I can't remember exactly what the figure was, something like, I think it was more than 50% of the booze sold in the off trade was at less than 50p.
Wow. So that's now all at 50p.
Yeah.
And what impact has that had on Scotland's drinking culture?
None whatsoever. I mean,
None.
It's not just me saying this. Public Health Scotland has been doing quite a good evaluation for 2 or 3 years now, and virtually everything has come out of the evaluation. Aside from the fact that there was a small reduction in alcohol consumption of about 3%, which is fairly trivial. In terms of A&E admissions, in terms of heavy drinkers, some heavy drinkers are drinking more. In terms of hospital admissions,
deaths from alcohol?
Deaths from alcohol are at a 10-year high, although they are also in England as well. During the lockdown, a lot of people drank themselves to death, unfortunately, so it's quite difficult to disentangle that. But in terms of, heavy drinking hasn't gone down. People are spending a bit less on food. People are switching from cider to Buckfast, for example, which has always been. Buckfast is it's a wine with caffeine in it, basically.
Right.
So renowned in Scotland for being quite a problematic drink.
Sounds
for this reason. But it's made in England, so the English are doing quite well out of this whole thing. But basically, minimum pricing has been a flop.
But this is interesting because you might say, from a kind of pure neoclassical economics point of view, that's sort of surprising. I mean, I can see all sorts of, if you like, libertarian reasons for opposing minimum pricing. But you would have thought if the price goes up of any given good or service, consumption would fall.
Well, it has, by about 3%.
By about 3%.
Compared to England. It's a pretty small decline, obviously. But the dependent drinkers, who this is supposed to be, dealing with, the problem drinkers, public order crime also has not fallen, alcohol-related crime has not fallen in Scotland. The people who this is supposed to be tackling
is the real problem drinkers.
They are not changing their behaviour. They are just cutting down other things, or they're cutting down going to the pub. Right? You can remember even your alcohol budget can be split between.
You're having a can of special brew at home rather than a pint in the pub, or several cans of special brew at home. Yeah. So is that 3% drop that, if you like, moderate drinkers have become even more moderate drinkers, but the sort of hardcore, heavy drinking 5 or 10% are carrying on as if nothing has changed.
The top 5% of men, from a drinking point of view, they're actually drinking more.
Right.
There has been a fairly small decline, but it's nevertheless a decline, mainly amongst women who weren't drinking that much in the first place.
Right.
Which actually is what an economist would predict, based on price elasticities. Yeah,
okay, that's interesting. So that's booze. We've done a bit on food, a bit on booze. Let's move on to smoking, where, I would have thought that the sort of public health campaigns, I mean, you must be running out of things you can do other than prohibit it. It's nearly impossible to smoke. But we had the Khan Review. Now, what was or is the Khan Review?
Javed Khan is a guy who used to be the CEO of Barnardo's, and for some reason he was asked by Sajid Javid, I think, to do a review of tobacco regulation because there's yet another tobacco control plan due to come out, and I think actually, as you kind of allude to, the government couldn't really think of much more to do on this, And so this guy was randomly selected to produce.
He's not an expert in public health. Then he used to run children's homes, right?
Well, I mean, not that Barnardo's run children's homes, but whatever Barnardo's do, he was in charge of. And he essentially went off and spoke to various public health fanatics and the likes of Action on Smoke and Health, basically prohibitionists, and said, "What should I put in this review?" And they said things like, "Let's put individual warnings on cigarettes."
So one of the was that cigarettes would be painted green
or brown,
and would have an individual health warning, like so it would actually say
smoking
this
kills on it.
Causes cancer or whatever. Right.
Just in case anyone hadn't
noticed that by now. There was also, am I right, a proposal to raise the smoking age every year. So it was some time ago. I think it went from 16 to 18.
Yeah.
But the idea was, as each year passes, it would go to 19 and then 20 and then 21. So you actually move to prohibition once we're all
in
dead.
100 years' time.
Yeah.
It'd never get to that stage, would it? Let's face it. You get if they did introduce it, and New Zealand genuinely is introducing this, weirdly. What will actually happen is you'll get to the point where like 29-year-olds can buy cigarettes and 28-year-olds can't, and people
you get a second-hand market.
People will just be saying, well, yeah, obviously there'll be all the black market issues, but even if it did get to that stage, even if there wasn't a black market issue, I think people would go, well, this is just silly.
Right.
And at that point, the public health people would say, you know what, you're right, it is silly. Let's just ban it for everyone. If 28-year-olds aren't old enough to smoke, nobody is. So let's just ban it.
So the Khan review, the Jarvis Khan review, was to suggest, these steps that fall short of prohibition, but as you say, might be just about fall short of prohibition. But this is just sort of sitting on the shelf at the moment, again, because of so much turnover in government and perhaps a lack of appetite.
I think there is. I think genuinely there's a lack of appetite for the ideas that he's put forward. And
so that's raising the smoking age every year. Cigarettes would be why would they be green or brown? Is that what I mean?
Oh, brown would just be a small cigar, wouldn't it, for a start off? So I don't think that would be particularly unattractive. Green, I guess.
Why does anybody care what the colour is of a cigarette?
Well, it's like the plain packaging thing.
Right.
There was a big discussion about, well, what colour should we have these plain cigarettes, the packs, I mean, and they decided that olive green was the most disgusting colour.
That's just I'm testing that human beings just react badly to that colour.
Supposedly so. The olive industry were not happy about it. Incidentally. Apparently green is the least pleasant colour, so they're going to...
I think one other proposal in the Javed Khan review was to ban films with actors using tobacco products and being screened before 9 o'clock at
TV,
night.
Yeah.
So that would be like the old vintage Bond movies, anything with Humphrey Bogart in it, all of that would have to be post-Watershed.
And even after the Watershed, they would have to pixelate it and put up a health warning.
You're kidding me. So you wouldn't actually...
Which I think they do in India or Thailand or somewhere.
So you wouldn't actually be able to see Sean Connery smoking a cigarette in Goldfinger or Dr. No.
You guess what he was doing.
But it would actually be... They would actually alter the image.
Yeah.
Gosh, truth. And it would come up at the bottom, real secret agents don't smoke cigarettes or
I think there might be a warning, as there was actually with the Beatles Get Back documentary. At the start it would say, warning, this programme contains...
highly disturbing scenes of people consuming tobacco products. Jeez. And then another proposal, have I got this right? Banning those who live in social housing from smoking within their own homes.
Yeah, which they do in America. A lot of these ideas have been gathered from other parts of the world. Some of them have never been tried at all, like the painting cigarettes green, the individual warnings. Some of them actually are either being implemented now or have recently been implemented. And in America, they're social housing. You're not allowed to smoke in your own home.
Wow. But what's the penalty? You get evicted or something?
I don't know. I don't think he mentions penalties. I think he's assuming that everyone's going to go along with these things.
Well, sadly, we often do, don't we? And then on an area where, I don't know, is there any cause for broad long-term optimism here? On vaping, next-generation products, you're on one variety of it, I'm on another. This has actually been an area where the UK, compared to the rest of the world, has taken a pretty liberal approach, right, compared to many other Western democracies, and has worked quite well here. I know there are all sort of restrictions in place, but it's quite common to find people like you and I who used to smoke combustible cigarettes now on some other devices, which I'm not applauding them for necessarily being wholly healthy, but are enormously less unhealthy than combustible cigarettes, right? This has been a win for the freedom movement in the UK compared to other jurisdictions.
It has. But I don't know if the freedom movement had much to do with it being a win. Maybe on the margins, I'd like to think so at least. But yeah, the public health people, as it happened in this country, there is a bit of a history of tobacco harm reduction in Britain going back to the 70s. It was British scientists who go, well, hang on, there's actually nothing wrong with nicotine per se in terms of health.
It's addictive, of course.
It's addictive, but it's not going to kill you. And if you can get rid of the nasties in the cigarettes, then that's the main thing. We're not interested in getting rid of the tobacco industry. We're not interested in getting rid of nicotine. We're interested in getting rid of the harm from smoking. So we already had that history here. And when vaping came along, there was people have kind of understood the concept in a way that they haven't so much in places like Australia, where they're just inherently hostile to anything to do with nicotine. So that's been very successful. Public Health England.
And what are the sort of numbers involved there? There's now more than 4 million vapors in the UK. How many smokers? I mean, what's the sort of...
there's still more smokers than there is vapors, but the smoking rate is now about 13%. I think the vaping rate is about 7 or 8%.
Okay.
So that is closing, and the vast majority of vapors are ex-smokers. There are very few never smokers who take up vaping, although inevitably that is rising over time, as I guess you would expect as smoking kind of disappears.
But these are probably youngsters who otherwise back in the day would have taken up cigarettes most likely.
Almost certainly, yeah, exactly. So it's been a great success, both in terms of liberty and in terms of public health. It shows that the two are not in conflict with one another. There's still a huge amount of pressure. There's a lot of misinformation about vaping, unfortunately. And even in Britain, where we have...
But this is because people think nicotine is the thing that's bad for you, it's the thing that gets you hooked.
Partially, but it's mainly been junk science coming over from America, really. People believe in stuff like, vaping causes popcorn lung, which it doesn't. People don't even know what popcorn lung is, but it just sounds unpleasant.
What is it?
It's a disease associated with a certain chemical that was first found in popcorn factories in America.
Right.
Very rare, and you need to be exposed to huge amounts of it. And it's not even in e-cigarettes anymore.
Right.
In Britain. But the misinformation in a way is the biggest hurdle. There's just so much stuff that people believe which is not true. And even though we have public health agencies in Britain who are actively pushing vaping for smokers, more people believe that vaping is as dangerous or more dangerous than smoking than it did 10 years ago.
And the World Health Organization, your favourite people, they've been dreadful. They've given a special award to India for banning the sale of e-cigarettes. I mean, so they're on the prohibitionist wing rather than this could be, although not perfect, it's a good way of switching people off more dangerous products.
They've been horrendous, the WHO. I mean, they're full-on prohibitionists, as is Mike Bloomberg, the billionaire ex-mayor of New York, who has been pouring millions of dollars into both the WHO and in just anti-vaping groups around the world. So a lot of the times when you hear this misinformation, you can trace it back to Bloomberg, actually.
Let's finish on gambling.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some gambling review.
Yep.
What's this thrown up there? Has been one, or there's about to be one?
There's supposed to be one. There should have been one, I guess, this year. Maybe there would have been had the political situation been more stable. But yeah, the initial public consultation was 2 years ago, and nothing yet has come of it. There's no indication at all, actually, what's supposed to be in this. The anti-gambling campaigners like to kind of make out as if the government is already committed to various things, banning gambling sponsorship, banning advertising, disrupting the online sector, limiting stakes in the online sector. They're mainly going after online and gambling, basically. But actually, the government has never...
Well, you might only be able to gamble 50 quid a week or 100.
Well, there was that idea as well. I don't think that's going to happen. But limiting the stakes in the same way as it did with the fixed odds betting terminals looks like something that they're at least considering. And yeah, it's possible. It is possible that somebody might come out and say you can only gamble £100 a month.
But then you can just join 25 different sites or something, couldn't you?
No, because they'll all get connected up as well as part of the kind of problem gambling restrictions, which actually isn't a bad idea. There is a lot we could do in terms of technology.
Wasn't the suggestion that if you could show you could afford it, they would allow you to...
How do you do that?
Yeah.
You've got to show them your bank statements and everything. And there must be GDPR issues with a lot of this stuff as well. I would have thought, So people don't want the gambling companies to have intimate details about their finances anyway. That probably wouldn't happen. It's more, I think, about the advertising and the sponsorship in the online area. And we simply don't know what the government has in mind on this. We don't know what they have in mind for the tobacco thing either, by the way. And
so the suggestion that gambling companies might not be able to have their name emblazoned on football shirts.
Yeah, this is the thing that seems to really annoy people.
Well, if you're watching a football match on telly rather than live, that they won't be... I think there's already a whistle-to-whistle ban, by which I mean gambling adverts, voluntary. But these voluntary arrangements are usually because they can see it would become mandatory if they didn't abide by it. So you can't advertise gambling while a football match is on at half-time, for sake of argument. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
So, but before...
just before and after.
Well, I mean, I can't see why after is a bit late, isn't it? Oh, I suppose there's another match coming down the line or something. But... okay, but that again could rear its ugly head. So let's wrap all this together. I mean, as I say, you're usually pretty bleak about the way things are going for freedom in general and in your area. But, all right, there's some irritating annoyances here, but basically, it's a story of procrastination, paternalism delayed, right? This must be a pretty good year. For how long have you been at the IEA? More than 10 years now.
Yeah.
Has this been the most triumphant year yet, even if it's basically getting a 0-0 draw?
Well, it's on its way, isn't it? I mean, it's not being kicked into long grass because politicians aren't necessarily against it, although Liz Truss, of course, was. It's being kicked into long grass. People keep changing around. No one knows what's going on. I don't get any sense. I don't get any sense at all, actually, from Rishi Sunak about any of this. I have no idea what his instincts are. I'm pretty sure that the Javid Khan stuff will be thrown out, and hopefully the tobacco control plan will focus mainly on tobacco harm reduction and that stuff, and vapes and nicotine pouches is quite possible, because the rest of it's so ludicrous.
Yep.
You know? Gambling, I mean, they're going to do something, and they're not going to be liberalising anything, so things will only get worse from that point of view. In Scotland, they've thrown everything in the kitchen sink in it, because they know there's then going to be a political battle, and they'll compromise, but they'll still end up with 25% of what they proposed, which should still be a lot.
Sure.
You know, so no, I'm not particularly happy about it.
Dial's still moving against us.
Of course, yeah, and then there's nothing moving in the other direction.
So, wrapping up from the perspective just of lifestyle economics, how would you rate 2022 out of 10?
Well, you can't complain too much. The only thing that's happened basically is that
2023 is going to be worse.
You can't put bacon at the end of aisles in supermarkets. So I'll give it a 4 out of 10.
That's about the highest number you've ever given.
It's higher than my optimism about the country.
Right, yeah, no, okay, well, there you go. Well, on that hugely optimistic note, that's all we've got time for this instalment of Year in Review. My thanks to Christopher Snowdon. If you are not yet a subscriber to this channel, please do hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you keep yourself informed of all the content that comes out on the IEA London YouTube channel. And if you've enjoyed watching, please click the thumbs up button and indeed leave a comment below. Enjoy the festive period and have an even happier new year than Chris Snowdon's anticipating. Bye for now. Well, if you enjoyed that conversation, why not watch one of these other videos? And while you're here, remember to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss out on a single IEA broadcast.